Hello, writers. Have you ever bought a writing craft book someone says you just have to read?
Is it still sitting on your shelf? Have you even cracked the spine?
That's totally me.
Don't ask Renee how many craft books she owns.
Why do we keep buying these books we never read?
We all want to improve as writers, but that's hard to do alone.
That's why we started the Words to Write By podcast, to tackle these books together, chapter by chapter, and learn from their advice.
Or not. Sometimes they're wrong.
Hi, I'm Renee Nelson, former college writing instructor turned full-time writer and podcaster. After many years, I finally have a complete draft of my memoir.
And I'm Kim Smuga-Otto, author of the humorous fantasy series Boy Bands and Dragons. The first book, Our Comeback Tour Slaying Monsters, will be released this year by Riverfolk Publishing.
And now, on with the podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Words to Write By. Just want to do a quick reminder before we get started that we have two process groups. One is just a process group to hang out and chat with other writers because it's lonely business being a writer. And the other one is a writing spree where you show up and I give a very short lesson from one of the writing advice books I have on my shelf, and then you write for 2 hours. And it's a great way to hold yourself accountable and show up and get 2 hours of good writing in. And that is every Wednesday. We toggle between the spree and the process group every other Wednesday. So just show up on a Wednesday and you'll see what we're doing.
The time is 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and if you go to our website, wordstowritebypodcast.com, there is a button to get to there, or if you're on Meetup, you can just look for the Words to Write By podcast, and you'll find us.
And most importantly, it's free.
Okay. We've done the last couple episodes a bit more of an overview, but today we are diving in for serious.
For serious.
Previously, we took The Hobbit, which really followed us along, but now we have got some books that maybe don't, and we're going to see if it actually works.
Dude, this book is a beast. It is a beast of a book.
So we decided to give ourselves some really fun books to read for examples to go along with it. Today we're doing The Last Unicorn, and we're going to use it to look at Volger's definition of a hero.
Yeah, the archetypes. So the last episode, we went through each step of the hero's journey, and we did a short thing on the archetypes, and now Volger is diving deep into each archetype, starting with, obviously, the hero.
Now, we chose Last Unicorn because we're both old, and we both saw it in theaters.
We're both old.
And we loved it. This book is over 50 years old.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if I saw The Last Unicorn in theaters. I know I watched it like on tape over and over and over again.
I went for a birthday party. I remember we got there a bit early, and I remember we were like waiting outside the actual door to the theater. Like you could see kind of little bits of the end of the movie before we got in.
Oh.
But I loved it. Oh, me and my best friend just absolutely adored it, and it worked its way into so many of our imagination games and such. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, any boys too, sure. But every little girl loves a unicorn,
Yeah.
And I adored unicorns and fairy tales and all that stuff. And so it really does hold a special place in our hearts, dear listener. And I've actually never read the book.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was a book until Kim's like, hey, let's read The Last Unicorn to talk about the writer's journey. It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm halfway through. I am in love. Love with Peter S. Beagle.
Right. And I was thinking before we get started, we might read a couple of quotes we like because it's really good for quotes.
Oh, yeah. There's little hearts everywhere. So sometimes it's just a line. I just marked this because I thought it was beautiful. A crow called once far away, and his cry drifted through the sunset like a single cinder. Just beautiful.
Yeah, and there was one I liked here. It's just an aside, basically. You have a bird, and she was sitting on her nest, singing to their children in a dreary drone. Spiders and sobugs and beetles and crickets, slugs from the roses and ticks from the thickets, grasshopper snails and a quail egg or two, all to be regurgitated for you. Lullaby, lullaby, swindle and schemes, flying's not near as much fun as it seems.
So fun, delightful. There's all these little poems in here sung by birds and butterflies, and it's just a delight.
It does not feel an old book. It feels very modern.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, let's take a look at the archetype stuff.
Oh boy. So what is a hero?
Vogler organizes his archetype chapters into first the psychological role and then the dramatic function. And I think most of the chapter actually relates to the dramatic function, not the psychological role, but he puts those at the front, I think, to kind of, I don't know.
To woo us?
Something like that. Maybe that kind of stuff goes over in Hollywood really well.
I don't know. He talks about the ego and the I and the it and Freud, which has totally been debunked. It's pretty ridiculous.
He says the psychological role of the hero considers itself distinct from the rest of the human race.
I mean, like, I don't know. Aren't we all heroes? How is this distinct from the rest of the human? I guess they're special. The hero is special.
By definition, you're going to tell a story about somebody who's special. So maybe the idea that you're telling, you have a protagonist, a hero, that is the center of a story makes them special.
I guess so. It's interesting because Joseph Campbell, if you watch his PBS specials, he's very much into like everyone has a story. Everyone is a hero in their own way, and very much making it very personal. And this one is like, only certain people get to be hero.
I was wondering about the use of hero versus protagonist. Obviously, every hero is the protagonist of the story, but is every protagonist a hero?
I think they are used interchangeably, but I think the hero archetype is about a protagonist specifically in a hero's journey. And the hero's journey is not every story known to man. It is just a specific type of story. Do you agree with me on the hero?
I agree. I think that there are other types of characters and stories, and protagonists can be various things. I will say that in genre fiction, the protagonist usually is a hero.
Yes. They like save the realm or something like that, something big.
Their actions are meaningful to a large number of people.
Right. What they do matters on a grand scale.
And I definitely think that the unicorn, I'm going to say that the unicorn is the main character or is the hero of.
Yes, it's named The Last Unicorn.
Even though for a bunch of the books she's not human.
I haven't gotten there yet, but yes, I've seen the movie,
right,
so I know what's going to happen.
Even though she's kind of got a weird role, like she is the individual driving the story.
Right. You know what we should do? We should give a very brief synopsis of The Last Unicorn.
I was thinking that.
Just in case you have not seen the movie or read the book.
So the setup is that there's a unicorn that has been living in a forest for eons, and one day discovers that unicorns are not common in the world. And in fact, there might not be any unicorns but her remaining. And so she starts on a quest to find others of her kind. And along the way, she meets a bumbling magician and this other woman, Molly Grew, and they eventually end up confronting this creature called the Red Bull, which drives all the unicorns into the sea.
Yes, which is where all the unicorns have been.
Mm-hmm. And the Red Bull is under control of King Hagrid.
Haggard?
Yes, Hagrid's from Voltron.
Not from Voltron. It's from Harry Potter.
Hagrid.
Hagrid is from Voltron?
No, Hagrid is from Harry Potter.
Yeah?
Hagrid is the witch from Voltron.
Are they spelled the same?
I don't think so. I think Hagrid is with an I.
Oh, well, okay.
King Hagar.
Haggard.
King Hagar. That's what I said.
Sorry. Go on.
King Hagar controls the Red Bull and has ordered the Red Bull to gather up all the unicorns. So the unicorn is going to be driven to the ocean, but at the last minute, the magician wizard casts a spell and turns her into a beautiful girl. Like, beautiful is like every single little girl watching this story, if they didn't already want to be the unicorn, wants to be this princess girl.
There would be a war at Troy for this girl.
Yeah.
She is that beautiful.
And then the story progresses. We introduce Prince Lear, who romances the unicorn, and we find out more
when she's a woman.
When she's a woman, more details, and in the end, a whole bunch of stuff comes together, and the unicorn becomes a unicorn again, and she drives off the Red Bull and frees all her people.
Spoiler alert.
So that's
Too
the
late.
story. But the critical thing is that at a certain point, the unicorn does become a girl.
Yes, she gets transformed. But she is a hero. She goes through her quest. She gets captured. She escapes. You know, they go through various different adventures on their way to the castle. Then they get to the castle. Then they have to do various adventures in the castle.
I think it would actually fall pretty close to the hero's journey, and that's one of the reasons I picked this book. Okay, so dramatic function. It said to give the audience a window into the story. The hero's role is to give the audience a window into the story.
To identify with the hero, the heroes have a combination of qualities, a mix of universal and unique characteristics in order for them to do that.
As we were just mentioning, girls identify with the unicorn and the princess.
Yes.
Big time.
Yes, yes, yes. It's a unicorn
Exactly.
that turns into a person.
A beautiful person.
Yeah. So, who might marry a prince. Woo.
So, a lot of identification there. Do you think that taking out all of the girly aspects, do you feel like the unicorn is identifiable for us as the audience? Our way into the book and the story?
Sort of.
Okay, why?
So it's because The Last Unicorn, what makes it kind of special is it's kind of a meta story. It is kind of about how the world of myth and legend and the opportunity to be a hero in a story is disappearing. And so people, they knew that their great-grandparents got to go on get to be heroes or got to go on quests, but now they don't anymore because that kind of world is gone. And so, what was the question again?
Do you think that the unicorn offers us, the reader, a way into the story?
Yes and no. Yes, because she's clearly on a quest and she has a motivation. And she has the same question that we do, or she has a question that we then also have a question of is, well, are there any unicorns? Are there any left? And so with that, we're kind of gripped into the story to discover what she discovers.
Right. And since she hasn't left the forest for eons, she herself is being introduced to this world at the same time that we are being introduced to this world.
Right. Fish out of water.
Mm-hmm. So how is she not an entry?
Well, this I actually think was expertly done. She is so ancient and she is just a magical creature that you can't identify with her. And the author doesn't spend a lot of time in the unicorn's head trying to decide things or figure things out. I mean, she is a unicorn. There's such a distance between what a unicorn is and what a person is.
Right. And I liked that element that she wasn't just equivalent of a person as a unicorn. She was something distinct, and Beagle makes a lot of effort to bring that distinction out in her conversations and the way that she sees the world. This does actually line up a little bit with some of the ideas in the writer's journey, because the idea is that you're supposed to give your hero some universal qualities, but some things that make them unique and special. So the fact that she's immortal does make her unique and special.
Yeah. Oh, she's very unique and she's very special. Yes. She's almost like a god in a way.
But one way that she isn't is that her basic goal is just to find others of her kind. Her basic issue is that she feels alone in the world and she wants to find other people to connect with or other unicorns. So that is actually a very fundamental human desire and something that we all can connect with.
In fact, it's part of being the hero is you start out being alone. The journey of many heroes is a story of that separation from the family or tribe, equivalent to a child's sense of separation from the mother. The hero archetype represents the ego's search for identity and a wholeness.
Mm-hmm. I did like that matched up. Okay, so next section, growth. The hero has to grow.
I think she grows quickly in experience learning the world around her, because it doesn't take long after she leaves her meadow to be captured in a carnival and put in a cage. And from that experience, I think she's wizened up quickly.
Yeah, so she grows over the course because she starts out very naive. Mm-hmm. And then just one thing after another. At first, she doesn't realize that people can't see that she's a unicorn. So there's that
Oh,
whole moment where
yeah.
she's realizing, wait a second, you think I'm a horse. She does not like that.
No, she deserves recognition. She's a unicorn.
She's also kind of vain.
What? She's a unicorn. But yes, she is rather vain. Vogler says the one who learns or grows the most in the course of a story is the hero.
Yeah.
And so, yes, she starts out, like Kim said, super naive.
I think the other aspect of her growth is something, and you haven't read till the very end, so you don't get this passage until then. But at the very end, she says, I have been mortal, and some part of me is mortal yet. I was full of tears and hunger and the fear of death. Though I cannot weep, and I want for nothing, and I cannot die, I am not like the others now. For no unicorn was ever born who could regret. But I do. I regret. So the fundamental thing she gets at the end, that she gains and changes, is that she learns to regret.
Yeah. It's sad.
Yeah.
The thing that's what she takes away from her journey. Like, oh my God, so sad.
Another thing that a hero sees is action. The hero is usually the most active person in the script. Do you think she was the most active person in the book?
No. That's why they have 2 side characters that do the action for her. It's true.
Yeah.
They have Schmedrick,
Yeah.
the magician. He's adorable. So he's this like crappy magician. He just can't seem to like get better at his magic. And then there's Molly Grew, who is this older woman. I think she regrets the most. She owes a lot of regret. So Schmedrick, he naively is kind of going through the world thinking that quests are still possible and that he will someday eventually get better. I mean, he even says at one point, yeah, I've got this crappy job, but I'll find a better one and I'll get, like, he's kind of positive.
What they do is a lot of the times the unicorn is kind of hanging out in the background, especially the first part of the book before she becomes human. She really can't interact with that many people. So she really can't quite have much of an active role. And Schmendrick and Molly's interactions are a bit more actionful.
Right. They join in her quest.
But later on in the book, when she becomes human, suddenly she does start interacting with a lot of different people.
Right. Note that before she turns into a person, a lot of people cannot tell that she is a unicorn, except for those who truly like believe that they still exist.
Right. So she has to be kind of passive for the first part. Once she becomes a human, she becomes more active. And it also says in the hero's journey that actually what's really important is in the final moments or in the climax or the ordeal, that's when the hero has to be active. They can't be passive. And that actually, this is a fault that people run in books where their hero in the most critical time points is saved by somebody else and are passive during that phase.
So I haven't read that far in the book, but I do remember in the film, she is very active. She drives that Red Bull into the sea.
Mm-hmm. And she also discovers stuff in the castle and a lot of...
oh, you're talking about like the whole half of that book.
The whole second half.
I see.
But yes, in the critical moment, she is the one that drives the bull away. Even though there is another hero and there's other people doing stuff, that's her job.
Yeah, but it's like a little unicorn and there's this huge bull. It's amazing to watch on a cartoon. I'm sure it'll be amazing to read when I get there. So yes, they have to be active. Desire leads to action. Then they also have to have altruism. They have to give up something of value. What does she give up?
Well, she gives up her immortality for a period of time when she's a human. And then when she goes back to being a unicorn, she gives up on love of a human. Mm-hmm. So she gives up quite a bit.
Yeah.
There's an idea that even though she's rescued all the fellow unicorns, she's given up some aspect of her perceived immortality that's going to prevent her from being, part of that group as much. She'll always be a little bit different than the rest of the unicorns.
Yeah, her identity is kind of at stake here.
So yeah, she sacrificed a lot. I mean, even at the very beginning, she sacrifices her safe place in the forest to go and find out what happened to the other unicorns.
Right. I think it's interesting that sacrifice seems to be the biggest drive of this story. Actually, it's the theme because that is what, she was going to regret. She regrets because of the sacrifices that she has had to make.
I mean, it gives a wonderful melancholy feel to the whole story.
Whole story's melancholy. Like you're just kind of have this general sad.
Yeah,
as you read in a good way, dear listener, in a good way.
Yeah, but everyone's a little bit diminished. Everyone's kind of given up some aspect of life. There's a lot of older characters in this story. Schmendrick and Molly are old characters.
Schmendrick isn't that old, is he?
Oh, you haven't got to that part yet.
Oh, shit. Interesting. Okay. But Molly, I really identify with Molly, especially at my age. I think we would probably be the same age. I don't know if they mentioned her age, but it breaks your heart. Even in the movie. But it's the same in the book, same scene. When she sees the unicorn, she goes, "Where have you been?"
Yeah.
I needed you and you were not there. And I just, even talking about it makes me kind of sad. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. You know, like you had all these dreams as a child and that you were going to be special or that you were going to find all this beautiful stuff or whatever. And it's a lot of it just doesn't happen. And then if you encounter it when you're an adult, it's like, where the frick have you been? This is awful. My whole life is like flashing before my eyes, you know?
They're all a bunch of people that have had their ideals downgraded.
They're cosplaying now. They are. I'm not in a bad. I mean, they're doing the best they can. They all want to be heroes,
Or part of the story. Yeah,
or they want to be part of the story, but that time is gone. And so, even though that they're trying, it's coming across as like cosplaying.
Yeah,
sad. Yeah. Anyway, all right. And then, are we done talking about sacrifice?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, so we're now on to dealing with death.
Volger says, at the heart of every story is a confrontation with death. And if the hero doesn't face actual death, then it's the threat of death or symbolic death. In the forms of a high-stakes game, love affair, or adventure, which the hero may succeed, live, or fail, die.
Okay.
We're covering all bases. We're covering actual death. We're covering a chance of dying. We're covering metaphorical death.
Yeah.
So I think the Last Unicorn does follow that. The hero does definitely have some metaphorical deaths there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, symbolically, she as a species, is dying at the time. Or is like, she's the last one, so they're almost all gone. Physically, she stops becoming a unicorn. And then when she becomes a unicorn again, she's not fully a unicorn. So she did kind of die inside a little bit. But also she had to brave death as she was beating the bull into the sea.
There's a mention that being immortal, she doesn't see death in the same way. She actually doesn't mind the idea nearly as much, but when she first encounters a Red Bull, she feels fear. It becomes real for her. So the first encounter, especially with the Red Bull, definitely, which she loses, she definitely has the dealing with death moment. And then that means when she actually faces off against the Red Bull and wins, she's overcoming that fear. There was one thing that Volger brought up in this next section, which is that heroism in other archetypes. And basically the idea is that a hero is not just a single character, but it is a role, and the archetype can be manifest in other characters when they act heroically. And that's definitely a case for this book. There's not one main character, really. It's called The Last Unicorn, but Schmendrick and Molly Grew have significant roles. And in the book especially, Lear, the prince, has a significant role. And each of them at moments act like the hero or act like the story is their hero's journey.
Yes, and that's what's so kind of awesome about this book is it's like a meta book about a hero's journey. It's like everyone in the story wants to go on a hero's journey in a world where there are no more heroes and there are no more journeys to be had. They're all motivated by this need and desire to fulfill one.
It's very much taught when you're learning to write that it's not simply enough to have, one hero and everybody else be side characters. That the best writers actually know what all the secondary characters want, what they're all striving for, what they're all thinking. And Anne Lamott had this idea too. It's like there may be a protagonist of the story, but everybody in the story is real.
Right. George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, right? It toggles from character to character, and you get to know every person
Before they die.
before they die. Yes. Well, they haven't died yet. Well, not all of them have died yet because I'm talking about the books, not the.
They may live forever just because he never finishes it.
And that's fine. Hey, dude, I understand now. And trying to finish my own book, I'm starting to get it.
But I think this contrasts with the idea of Vogler's attempt at identifying the fact that in modern stories, everybody has their own journey, their own path, their own wants and needs and successes and failures. It's not just one hero and everybody else is a side character.
Yeah. And if it is that way, it's probably not a very good story.
Right.
But in this case, yes, you could have other characters that wear the hero mantle, but there are different types of heroes too.
Mm-hmm. I would like to bring up one. This is again from the book, which, as you said, it's very meta. Towards the end, like things are looking really bad, and Schmendrick isn't able to use his magic to stop the bad things from happening. And Lear basically says, "Well, what use is wizardry if it cannot save a unicorn?" demands Lear. And at that point, Schmendrick says, "That's what heroes are for." And that's when Lear becomes a hero. But in this book, it actually calls out the idea that, this prince is going to be officially a hero. While this book definitely fits the discussion we have, I think that Peter Beagle actually kind of does a contrary statement in the actual text.
Yeah, he makes it known that this story is about stories.
Or he makes it known that this isn't a simple tale where there's one hero.
He says, "Haven't you ever been in a fairy tale before?" The magician's voice was kind and drunken, and his eyes were as bright as his new money. "The hero has to make a prophecy come true, and the villain is the one who has to stop him. Though in another kind of story, it's more often the other way around, and a hero has to be in trouble from the moment of his birth, or he's not a real hero. It's a great relief to find out about Prince Lear. I've been waiting for this tale to turn up a leading man." The unicorn was there as a star is suddenly there, moving a little away ahead of them, a sail in the dark. Molly said, "If Lear is the hero, what is she?" "That's different. Haggard and Lear and Drin and you and I, we are in a fairy tale and must go where it goes, but she is real. She is real." Schmendrick yawned and hiccuped and shivered all at once. "We'd better hurry. Perhaps we should have stayed the night. Blah, 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 blah." Anyway.
There are several scenes where Schmendrick gets drunk.
Oh, nice.
But no, I think that's great. Where basically the author is telling you, well, all these other characters can be the heroes or whatever archetypes and all that, but that unicorn is real.
Yes.
Not an archetype.
No, exactly. Yeah, she's not an archetype. She's a freaking unicorn. All right. So then talks about character flaws.
Yes.
So he says that interesting flaws humanize a character. Flaws also give a character somewhere to go. The so-called character arc, in which a character develops from condition A to condition Z through a series of steps. Flaws are a starting point of imperfection and incompleteness from which a character can grow.
Honestly, this is basic writing advice. You always make sure your character has flaws. And maybe it's more important here because we're talking heroes and people might think, oh, well, the hero just has all good parts because they're just a hero. But as with any character, if they don't have flaws, no one's going to like them.
This is the difference between DC movies and Marvel movies.
This is the issue with, say, the Mission Impossible movies.
I don't like Mission Impossible because I don't like Tom Cruise.
Right. But the character there never has any flaws.
Oh, see, this is why I also don't go see those movies. And my husband's like, oh, I'm going to go see it. I'm like, okay, good luck. Have fun. I'm not going with you. I'm never going to get those hours back.
Also, the other thing about having flaws is if you have a flaw, you can overcome it. And that is actually a challenge. And that means the character has grown and all that. You need to start with some flaws to your character. Otherwise, you don't have as much room for growth. Flaws are fundamental. And all these other things we've been talking about happen because a character has flaws.
Right. And it's easy to say, oh, I'll just put my character through this plot, right? Plot point 1, plot part 2. Well, that's the stuff that's happening externally. But what the flaws do is it helps the reader connect with the character internally.
Right. So what are the unicorn's flaws?
She's naive in the beginning.
She's kind of vain.
She is kind of vain.
Not very empathetic towards people around her.
She's a little empathetic towards the harpy. The harpy is like her.
Yeah.
You know, you feel sorry for her when she becomes a human. You're like, oh no, this is bad. In some way, she is now flawed because she is no longer a unicorn. Because unicorn is like, you know, the ultimate, like, you get to be a unicorn? Like, why would you want to be anything else? You've already achieved something for not even trying. But then she becomes a human. She's clearly demoted. Just her being is a flaw.
Right, yeah. And she has to deal with that. And I think that Beagle writes her as this greatest of all time character all the way through the book so that when she becomes a human, we realize what a big step down that is for her. Because under normal circumstances, being the pretty girl that gets the prince is like, you know, that's a step up.
Yeah, it's interesting that I can see now why it was critical that he demote her so much. Because there isn't much growth for a unicorn.
Right.
On a quest like that without having flaws, and unicorns aren't supposed to have flaws. And he follows through on that pretty well.
Yeah.
And then so she's not a unicorn anymore, so now she's allowed to have flaws, which is the problem because now she has regret when she comes back. Oh my God, she is a unicorn with a flaw.
Yeah. Oh, it makes her a better unicorn in some ways.
I don't know. Anyway, well, we could talk about that later. Let's just say that there's so much to say about this book, which means it's so very layered and beautiful, and you got to go run and go buy the book and read it. Okay. We did character flaws, and now we're on varieties of hero.
Okay. So basically, willing and unwilling heroes, group-oriented and the loner heroes, anti-heroes, tragic heroes, and catalyst heroes. We're going to go through all those and just, you know, so we're covered. But obviously, our unicorn really only falls into one category, so we'll identify that.
Right, but we did talk about how the other characters throw on the hero mantle. And so we could probably bring in Princeler, Schmedrick, and Molly standing in place for, if in their own tales, they are a hero. We could talk about them as being a hero.
Okay, so first we have willing and unwilling heroes.
They're all willing.
Yeah.
The unicorn is willing, the prince is willing, Molly is willing, and Schmedrick is willing.
Yeah. They're not gung-ho exactly. Definitely not the unicorn. Like, there's a period of time in the forest where she's not quite willing to leave. But then when she decides on her own. Nobody gets dragged off by Gandalf the wizard to go on a quest.
No. An example of an unwilling hero would be Bilbo.
Yeah.
Or it's like Wolverine. He's never willing. They always have to, like, drag him kicking and screaming into the tail.
I think he falls a little bit more different in anti-hero. I think unwilling is usually somebody that wants to stay in the
ordinary
world.
Okay.
And refuses to call adventure. So that's that.
And the next one is anti-heroes, which is a specialized kind of hero. It's like, he says, you could be an outlaw or a villain from the point of view of society, but with whom the audience is basically still in sympathy.
So these are the rogue heroes, the ones where nobody else understands them, but we are totally rooting for them, and we know they're good people.
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man's a classic one. Like,
the
rest of the world doesn't understand Spider-Man, but we all know he's just this great kid.
He's just a teenager. We've all been there. What are the two? The anti-heroes of two types?
Yes, there's another type which is which are tragic heroes. Central figures of stories who may not be likable or admirable, whose actions we may even deplore, like Macbeth or Scarface or Joan Crawford from Mommy Dearest, which I have not seen.
It's pretty disturbing.
These are the bad guys. This is Breaking Bad.
Oh, yeah.
This is anti-hero in the sense that you actually don't want to like them.
But you do because it's so good. I love anti-heroes. I love.
Right, but it's easy to go for the rogues that are just rejected by society. But then there's that, like, how do you make someone that is actually like you, who you wouldn't want as a member of your family, but you still want to read the book about?
So there's a short story and a movie, one of my favorite movies, but also really, really good short story, Sideways.
Sideways. I was going to say Sideways.
Because you knew I was going to say it?
Yeah.
I've mentioned it before on the podcast.
Yeah.
It is so good. It is so, I don't know why. And being from California, maybe it has something to do with it. But he is a despicable human being, that protagonist. He's a jerk. He's a liar. He's a thief. He does shitty things to good people and bad people, and you just can't stop watching the train wreck. And you care about him. Why? I don't know. That's why it's so lofty to me, because it's like, man, you got to be a good writer to make a character that can do all of these things and you still care. You know?
Yeah, and that would be its own podcast series. Like, how do you make this tragic character? But do you think they're actually the hero? Would you say they're a hero?
Oh, it's not a hero's journey.
Right.
And I think heroes are mostly just in hero's journey.
So do you think that it actually its own category of hero is the anti-hero, tragic hero? This is one of those situations where he's including a whole bunch of different stuff. Do you think that really is a character in the hero's journey? Do you really think a tragic character like that follows a hero's journey? You could use the techniques of the hero's journey to write that story about that despicable but you still love him character?
It almost seems as if, I'm not saying he's trying to say that he came up with all this or that everyone's a freaking hero, but he's kind of trying to say every character can be put in this category of a hero. And it's unfair of him to do that because you can't.
Here's my argument. If you had an anti-hero, you had a tragic hero, a tragic character that you fundamentally don't like as a person, but you want to see the story progress, is that actually a hero then? Are we rooting for him to succeed in the same way that we'd root for a hero to succeed if he's doing horrible stuff along the way?
I think we want redemption.
We want redemption. We want him to reform.
Yes.
But that's something personal for him. I mean, it feels like that's almost a different story than the hero's journey. A path of redemption for somebody that's an anti-hero.
I feel like specifically for the protagonist in Sideways, his redemption is very realistic, but he does get redeemed. And the thing, one, you keep watching because it's kind of cringy. You're like, oh God, he's doing this. But there are aspects of what he does that you do see in yourself. And it makes you realize that you are redeemable. Even if this guy can find some redemption, then there's hope for you yet. So that's kind of what I feel the anti-hero kind of does. It's hard to identify with someone so despicable, but we are all flawed.
So we were talking recently about whether or not we should have questions for our audience. This is one. How about we pose this to: if anyone has a written story, not a movie, but like a piece of literature or whatever, that has what follows as an anti-hero, can you take a look at it and tell us if it actually follows the steps of the hero's journey, or if you think that it follows some different storyline completely? So if you got an idea like that, you can email us.
wordstorightbypodcast@gmail.com. You can just email us.
Yep. And if you got some good ideas, we will read out your examples on the show next week.
Yeah. Just as an aside, so sometimes he said that with anti-heroes, there's the tragic hero, and that tragic heroes are flawed heroes who never overcome their inner demons and are brought down and destroyed by them. They might win the boon or save the realm. They might do all of these things, but in the end, the flaw wins in the end. Like the flaw gets to them. So I immediately thought of like that Haymitch guy in it's famous. All the kids are trying to kill each other.
Lord of the Flies?
No, but that's a good book. No, it's really popular. There's movies.
Hunger Games?
Yes. So there's the old hero or the old guy that actually beat the games, and then he comes back and he has to train them, but he's like a drunk, and he's got issues, right? He's like, well, you're going to die anyway, so what do I care? He reaches redemption, but he actually does live. And he cleans his act up. So no, I guess he's supposed to be a tragic hero, but he never quite fulfills the function completely.
Like I said, we're going to look for some tragic heroes, and we're going to address that next podcast, because this sounds interesting, but not something you can come up with at the top of our heads.
Well, Logan. Have you seen Logan?
That's a movie. You got to pick a book.
Shit. Okay, we'll come back to you.
Yes, we'll circle back to that.
All right, now we are at group-oriented heroes.
Okay. This is classic Bilbo. He has all these other hobbits he loves hanging around with, and he leaves them all behind. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty standard one. It's like Superman left his planet. It's so common. The regular world, you have ties and support, and you leave all that behind to go on your quest.
Yeah. He says that it's very much like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Like it sets itself up. These kind of heroes set themselves up for that. He says the story is one of separation from the group, Act 1, lone adventure in the wilderness away from the group, Act 2, and usually eventual reintegration with the group, Act 3.
So we covered all that last episode. Loner heroes. Now, this is, I think, who the unicorn is.
Yeah.
The stories begin with the heroes estranged from society. Their natural habitat is the wilderness. Their natural state is solitude. Their journey is one of re-entry into the group. And that's exactly what happened. She's all by herself. She steps onto the real world, and before she knows it, she actually has a party, even though she maybe didn't want one.
Yeah. I just realized something. So when Schmedrick and Molly meet, and Molly goes through her, figures things out, she realizes the unicorn. She says, I'm going on this journey. Like, she didn't ask. She just said, I'm going. I remember that Schmedrick actually was annoyed by this. Like, he didn't want.
Yeah, he didn't want it.
And then I'm like, fanboy. Like, of course, some dude. And then I went, oh my gosh. In his version of like the hero that he wants to be in his quest, he has to be alone, right? Like she's messing up his fantasy.
Yeah. Also, she has a connection with the unicorn that he doesn't, and that's
there's that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then we get the catalyst hero.
The catalyst hero.
Their main function is to bring about transformations in others.
They change a system.
Yes, but they don't necessarily change themselves. Right. I mean, this is for episodic fiction or whatever, where you're constantly going back to start, where the hero's the same person at the beginning of each story.
Right. They never really change. So I always used to tell students when I taught my social science fiction course that a zombie story is not about the zombies. A zombie story is about all the people reacting to the zombies.
Right.
A catalyst hero is somebody like a zombie, but it's how the world reacts to the zombie. It's not a zombie because it's clearly they have a character. There's all these things that, they're not just flavor, but it's kind of like a fish out of water, but the fish makes everyone have to live in water now.
Do you know the actual chemical explanation for catalyst?
No.
Okay, so it's a chemistry term. Basically, you have a reaction where you have a couple of molecules that are going to form into some other molecules, and this reaction will happen, but it will happen at such a slow pace that might not even happen. These molecules will be inert. They can react to each other, but they won't. They'll just hang around together, and then you add the catalyst to the mix, and suddenly the reaction goes forward. But the catalyst doesn't necessarily change, and the catalyst isn't part of the final products, but it's what you put in the reaction to get it to go forward.
Oh, interesting. So they're the kick in the pants.
Exactly. And so it's a great metaphor because it's a character that is not changed, but changes everything else around them by their presence. I mean, Forrest Gump.
Yep.
And I'm going for movies. I'm trying to think of any books that would fit that bill. I mean, Curious George.
No, I haven't thought of Curious George in forever.
I think it's common for kids stuff. I think kids love the character that causes everything to happen.
Pippi Longstocking.
Pippi Longstocking.
Oh, yes. I love Pippi.
Pollyanna.
I never read any Pollyanna.
Well, that's actually a movie. I'm not sure if it's a book. But yeah, a lot of those kids ones, because that way, the kid doesn't change or changes only a certain amount, but largely it's all the stuff they do to the people around them.
Right, right. Just to drive the point home, these kinds of heroes undergo few internal changes, but primarily act to help others or guide them in their growth.
So I think that's kind
of... There's one more.
Oh, one more bullet point. What's that?
This is the road of heroes.
Okay.
It's the training montage. Heroes are symbols of the soul and transformation and of the journey each person takes through life. The stages of that progression, the natural stages of life and growth, make up the hero's journey. The hero archetype is blah, 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 blah.
I'm kind of wondering why they put the Road of Heroes at the very end when we were talking about different types of heroes. But I also noticed that it basically allows him to finish off the chapter by mentioning the heroine's journey, A Woman's Quest for Wholeness by Maureen Murdoch.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about a female. By the way, there was one person in Mommy Dearest. He mentioned one female hero. Yeah, I felt Gardner vibes.
Okay, so here's the question. We've finished the first in-depth chapter of this book. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much are you buying the hero's journey as far as like a tool for writing or crafting a book?
It feels like he's making categories out of something that didn't need to have categories in order for a book to exist.
Yeah, it's obviously a good analyst tool. I liked the fact that, if you pinpoint the hero needs to do certain things in the story to make the story work. So I think that was a good point that in favor of this. But I do think that when he started going to all the different types of heroes, all the different types of quests, like at that point, it feels like he's reaching.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I can see it. Some are very distinct, like I know it's a movie, but Wolverine, he's a very specific type of protagonist.
But yeah, that's a common protagonist versus hero.
He is a hero. He's a superhero. He's definitely a hero.
Right.
There are different types of heroes. I totally get that. What I don't like is that he gives very little example. And what examples he does provide, he just name drops a movie.
Yeah.
And if this was so pervasive, if this was so good, like if people really enjoyed this stuff so much that they should do this, and he's going to speak with authority as if he knows all this, he should prove it. But he doesn't, and that makes me think he can't.
Yeah. The concept of a hero in a story is so commonly seen in genre fiction that it can be applied to a book. And I really did see the hero in The Last Unicorn.
But it's genre fiction.
If we cut out the non-genre fiction, if we basically focus on genre fiction, which actually is the stuff I want to write anyway, so it's useful, the hero archetype exists in genre fiction.
Yeah.
And it helps us understand the story when we understand that a hero in myth and legend followed certain steps because that was the way the storytellers told stories.
Right.
So this first chapter, even though I got ticked off with several parts, I will say that it actually was applicable to The Last Unicorn and probably would be applicable to a story with a hero in it.
What ticked you off?
I just got ticked off at the end where he's like throwing in all the, this line here. Ideally, every well-rounded character should manifest a touch of every archetype because the archetypes are expressions of the parts that make up a complete personality. Everything is everything.
Right.
When he got those hand waving, when he tried to stretch it, I didn't like that. But I will say that I'm still on board with the idea that for a genre fiction, you can identify a hero. Now, the question whether you can identify the other archetypes will be for our next episode.
Right. And it remains to be seen if this can be applied to non-genre fiction books.
And that's even a bigger stretch, but we'll stick with genre for right now. I think that's about the end of the podcast. We have a workshop episode coming up after this, and what I was thinking we could do is we could take Renee's idea for her story and identify the hero in that story, because it is genre.
Mm-hmm. Genre fiction.
And it might be an anti-hero, from what I can tell.
Of course it is, because that's the kind of one I like.
So I think we'll go through some of these ideas, and we'll see if we can't use this chapter on the hero archetype to flesh out the character and to help her come up with how this story is going to go. Because you have a basic plot line, but the question is it a good plot line?
Well, I'm not very good at plot, so this will probably be helpful for both me and the listener to see exactly just how much I mess it up and how much it can be fixed, and how smart Kim is as she helps me figure all of these things out. I swear I would not get very far without her, dear listener.
It's always easier to be more critical of someone else's stuff.
It is.
It's like it's always so much more fun to clean someone else's house.
Right. Okay, I just want to mention, I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning. I spent the 2.5 days creating this crazy beast of a study guide for the hero's journey. I really, and I still got to edit it, but what I did with Kim's help, because we're so annoyed that all this guy has, Vogler, all he has is movies to bring up, and he doesn't even explain them that much. And we wanted to apply it to actual writing so that it could actually be useful writing advice. We applied Vogler's hero's journey to passages from The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So I went through, found each step, and each step I looked into the book. I was reading the book and putting in passages that reflect the journey. And it follows it to the T.
Yeah.
But as we mentioned in the last as we mentioned in the last episode, J.R. Tolkien wrote The Hobbit before Joseph Campbell wrote his Heroes of a Thousand Faces.
So it's all a little sus.
A little sus, yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I guess maybe it was Tolkien that figured all of this stuff out first and then recreated it. And I don't know. But anyway, I think he is the father of genre fiction.
Anyway, but Renee's notes are actually a really nice way to read what the steps of the hero's journey are. That's not from this book and is not from someone that's constantly quoting movies. So if you want to go back over what those steps of the hero's journey are and you want a reference that's a book and it's consistent and it demonstrates all these steps, Renee's got the notes for you.
Yeah, they're really long and detailed. Just gonna say, so if that ain't your jam, they're probably not for you. But if you want detailed notes with passages, I got you. I got you back.
Yeah, so check those out on our websites, wordstorightbypodcast.com. Come to one of our meetups, and we can even possibly discuss it during a process group, exactly, whether or not your stories fit in the hero's journey, and or your experiences with that. And see you next week for a workshop.
Next week, workshop. Bye.
Words to Write By is produced by Renee Nelson and Kim Smiga-Otto. Our theme music is Roll Back the Carpet by Cool Cat Music. Have a great day.
Vogler